Homen. Quater made Homen and gave him 2 crowns and let him decide what to do with the extra one. Homen had a son named Pinto Bunyan, to whom he immediately gave his 2nd crown. Pinto Bunyan helped Homen with all that he did. Homen made a bunch of beings called yints. The yints were blue and looked like little bugs. The blue yints spent their first day of existence fashioning small spears. Soon the yints had broken up into small communities. Each community had a specific task to accomplish which helped all the other yint communities. Blue Yint South was in charge of growing food, Blue Yint North built housing for other communities, and so on and so forth. All was peaceful and working efficiently, so Pinto Bunyan made some yints of his own, only his were white. Now it came about when the white yints began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, that the sons of the blue yints saw that the daughters of the white yints were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. The Hutsamutsa were in the world those days and also afterward when the sons of blue yints came into the daughters of white yints and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty yints who were of old, yints of renown. The white yints instantly mingled with the blue yints, but they refused to acknowledge the community system of the blue yints. The white yints enjoyed the fruits of all the blue yints' hard work, but did not help them work at all. It only took one white yint to throw an egg at a blue yint one morning to cause a dreadful feud. So Hemhemhema of the blue yints rose with all the blue yints of war to go up to White Yint East, and Hemhemhema chose 30,000 blue yints, valiant warriors, and sent them out at night. And he commanded them, saying, "See, you are going to ambush the city from behind it. Do not go very far from the city, but all of you be ready. Then I and all the blue yints who are with me will approach the city, and it will come about when they come out to meet us as at the first, that we will flee before them, and they will come out after us until we have drawn them away from the city, for they will say, 'They are fleeing before us as at the first,' so we will flee before them. Then you will rise from your ambush and take possession of the city. Then it will be when you have seized the city that you shall set the city on fire. See, I have commanded you." Most of the yints of war in attendance could not understand Hemhemhema, for the language he used was flowery and outdated. Still, few in attendance there from among all those in attendance did hearken and understand. Even did they reckon the sayings of Hemhemhema, and straightway did they clue in their buddies who were just lollygagging about, scratching their heads. At once, all who heard this explanation understood Hemhemhema's plan. So Hemhemhema sent them away, and they went to the place of ambush and remained between White Yint West and White Yint East and the west side of White Yint East. But Hemhemhema spent that night at the Wagon Leisure Inn. Now Hemhemhema rose early in the morning and mustered the blue yints, and he went up with the elders of Blue Yint before the blue yints to White Yint East. Then all the blue yints of war who were with him went up and drew near and arrived in front of the city and camped on the north side of White Yint East. Now there was a valley between him and White Yint East, and he took about 5,000 blue yints and set them in ambush between White Yint East and White Yint West on the west side of the city. So they stationed the blue yints, all the army that was on the north side of the city and its rear guard on the west side of the city. And Hemhemhema spent that night in Sid's Garden Spot Lodge. And it came about when the king of White Yint East saw it, that the men of the city hurried and rose up early and went out to meet the blue yints in battle, he and all his people at the appointed place before the desert plain. But he did not know that there was an ambush against him behind the city. And Hemhemhema and all the blue yints pretended to be beaten before them, and fled by the way of the wilderness. And all the people who were in the city were called together to pursue them, and they pursued Hemhemhema, and were drawn away from the city. So not a yint was left in White Yint East or White Yint West who had not gone out after blue yints, and they left the city unguarded and pursued the blue yints. Then Homen said to Hemhemhema, "Stretch out the spear that is in your hand toward White Yint East, for I will give it into your hand." So Hemhemhema stretched out the spear that was in his hand toward the city, and the men in ambush rose quickly from their place. And when he had stretched out his hand, they ran and entered the city and captured it, and they quickly set the city on fire. When the men of White Yint East turned back and looked, behold, the smoke of the city ascended to the sky, and they had no place to flee this way or that, for the people who had been fleeing to the wilderness turned against the pursuers. When Hemhemhema and all the blue yints saw that the men in ambush had captured the city and the smoke of the city ascended, they turned back and slew the men of White Yint East. and the others came out from their city to encounter them so that they were trapped in the midst of blue yints, some on this side and some on that side, and they slew them until no one was left of those who survived or escaped, but they took alive the king of White Yint East and brought him to Hemhemhema. Now it came about when the blue yints had finished killing all the inhabitants of White Yint East in the field in the wilderness where they pursued them, and all of them were fallen by the spear until they were destroyed, then all the blue yints returned to White Yint East and struck it with the spear. And all who fell that day, both male and female, were 12,000. All the people of White Yint East. For Hemhemhema did not withdraw his hand with which he stretched out the spear until he had utterly destroyed all the inhabitants of White Yint East. So Hemhemhema burned White Yint East and made it a heap forever, a desolation until this day, and he hanged the king of White Yint East on a tree until evening and at sunset. Hemhemhema gave a command, and they took his body down from the tree and threw it at the entrance of the city gate and raised over it a great heap of stones that stands to this day. So Ichigoplasty and all the White Yints who were with him arose by night and lay in wait against Blue Yint South in 4 companies. Now Pimento Lufa, the son of Texadrill, went out and stood in the entrance of the city gate, and said, "Who is Ichigoplasty that we should serve him?" And Ichigoplasty and the White Yints who were with him arose from the ambush. And when Pimento Lufa of the Blue Yints saw the White Yints, he said to Factotron, "Look, Yints are coming down from the top of the mountains." But Factotron said to him, "You are seeing the shadow of the mountains as if they were Yints." And Pimento Lufa spoke again and said, "Behold, Yints are coming down from the highest part of the land, and one company comes by way of the Diviner's Sandwich." Then Factotron said to him, "Where is your boasting now with which you have said, 'Who is Ichigoplasty that we should serve him?' Are these not the White Yints whom you despised? Go out now and fight with them." So Pimento Lufa went out before the leaders of Blue Yint South and fought with Ichigoplasty. And Ichigoplasty chased him, and he fled before him, and many fell wounded at the entrance of the gate. Then Ichigoplasty remained at Blue Yint West, but Factotron drove out Pimento Lufa and his relatives so they could not remain in Blue Yint South. Now it came about the next day that Blue Yints went out to the field, and it was told to Ichigoplasty. So he took his White Yints and divided them into 3 companies and lay in wait in the field. When he looked and saw the Yints coming out from the city, he rose against them and slew them. Then Ichigoplasty and the company who was with him dashed forward and stood in the entrance of the city gate. The other 2 companies then dashed against all who were in the field and slew them. And Ichigoplasty fought against the city all that day, and he captured the city and killed the Blue Yints who were in it. Then he razed the city and sowed it with salt. When all the leaders of the Tower of Blue Yint South heard it, they entered the inner chamber of the Temple of Hallmark, or the Door. And it was told to Ichigoplasty that all the leaders of the Tower of Blue Yint South were gathered together. So Ichigoplasty went up to Mount Chlorescent, he and all the Yints who were with him, and Ichigoplasty took an axe in his hand and cut down a branch from the trees and lifted it and laid it on his shoulder. Then he said to the Yints who were with him, "What you have seen me do, hurry and do likewise." And all the Yints also cut down each one his branch and followed Ichigoplasty and put them on the inner chamber and set the inner chamber on fire over those inside, so that all the men of the Tower of Blue Yint South also died, about 1,000 men and women. Then Ichigoplasty went to Blue Yint Southwest, and he camped against Blue Yint Southwest and captured it. But there was a strong tower in the center of the city, and all the men and women with all the leaders of the city fled there and shut themselves in, and they went up on the roof of the tower. So Ichigoplasty came to the tower and fought against it, and approached the entrance of the tower to burn it with fire. But a certain female Yint threw a 16-ton weight on Ichigoplasty's head, crushing his skull. Then he called quickly to a young Yint, his armor-bearer, and said to him, "Draw your spear and kill me, lest it be said of me, a female Yint slew him." So the young Yint pierced him through, and he died. When the White Yints saw that Ichigoplasty was dead, each departed to his home. When the Blue Yints and the White Yints started to fight, so did Pinto Bunyan and Homen. Quater stepped in and took Pinto Bunyan's crown away and gave it to a new being he made, called Arvin.